Welcome to this live stream section, guys. Welcome to my YouTube page. For those of you watching on other platforms, welcome. Today we have Tailpipe, and Tailpipe is here today so we can talk about what is going on in America. There's a lot of information being dumped on everybody, but the latest of them all is the Epstein files. Over 3 million files released, to the space without any proper classification. So this and a host of other issues we intend to talk about today, including Iran. Well, some are saying this could be a distraction from what is going on the international stage. The This information war is very important. So we have Tailpipe here today with us, and welcome to the live stream section. This is your first edition, and we hope to have you back and back again. As things continue to unfold.
Sure.
So we hope you can share some of your expertise with us in relations to what is going on in America and what is going on the international stage.
Sure.
Welcome.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. Just making sure sound is okay. Everything.
Yeah, the sound is fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that what you're mentioning at a superficial level, it has consequential geopolitical consequences for the entire world. And what we're basically seeing is that the entire nation, or at least the most powerful nation in the world right now, or what is supposed to be the most powerful nation, is being governed and run under corrupt practices and what is, by any measure, pedophiles. Period. And I don't think that that's a far stretch to say. And I think it's problematic to the highest degree.
Yeah, when you say pedophiles in that context, some will say, well, hang on a second. This has been going on for a while, and particularly with the President Trump, and people say, oh, there were videos linking him to Epstein, and others will argue that, well, there's no damning evidence to show that him and some other world leaders, as a matter of fact, were actually involved in that they were just friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and that people and some are even saying, why put this out to the media? What is the purpose of it? Because the media cannot really classify it or cannot really subpoena anything. They cannot do anything. They're pressuring Congress to sanction anybody. So when you say that the world, as we see today, is run by men that engage in this sort of practices, I didn't see in any of those files where we have any damning evidence, to show that they actually had those kind of sexual contacts with these minors.
So, and again, I know that the files are voluminous. I know that there's millions of files. Even if you were to have AI synthesize it, which many of us have started doing, you still wouldn't be able to make concrete, formulated opinions or judgments based off of that synthesis. And again, there's still information that we haven't seen. And I think it's fair to say that given the United States' track record in history, transparency is not one of its strong suits. That's first and foremost. However, I'll counter what you just said with this. The media is, by and large, probably the most powerful entity that has ever existed. It has the ability to raise governments, and it also has the ability to topple governments. And we have countless examples, the Arab Spring. You could look throughout Europe. Again, there's a reason why when the United States engages in what's called covert action isn't 007 with a suit and a cigar and a Walter PP7. Covert action has to deal with media influencing operations, business and industry influencing operations in foreign lands. That is what covert action is. There's a reason why the United States, when it goes to take over a country, one of the first things that it does is to gain control of the media sources in said country. So the idea that the media is not powerful enough, or they are not able to, with their $1 billion that they have in revenue and in their coffers, and the teams that they can employ to synthesize this information. This is files that you and I are looking at just on our own, and we're seeing damning evidence. As a man, my measure and my bar where I say, I just can't really, I can't talk to you, and I'll talk to just about anybody. But when it comes to rape, pedophilia, or any of those types of actions, I don't want to talk to you. There's nothing to be said. I don't care about your cultural difference. Again, I understand certain countries, for example, maybe Afghanistan, if you want to name it, or other countries anywhere around the world. We can keep it analogous. Any country around the world is free to have their own standards and their own culture. You have child bride marriages that take place around the world. I don't care about around the world. I care about this country. And in this country, when you have a system that is literally corrupted by a group of individuals
Mm-hmm.
that are engaged in sexual blackmail and exploitation of children, and that is acting on behalf of a foreign nation called Israel, and the media is covering that up or obfuscating, I believe that that is a problem. So again, maybe your other viewers aren't going to be able to understand this, but I was alive for when Bill Clinton was impeached for getting fellatio in the White House office. I was alive for that. The media is what condemned him. The media is what brought him down, per se. It wasn't just the fact of Congress. It wasn't just the actions and the votes that the Congress took. It's the media that gained such virality that the public viewed it and deemed it to be unattainable. And right now, what the media is currently doing, because they are Zionist controlled, they are protecting and they are literally giving cover to pedophiles, because the only thing that you can reasonably do when the media talks about this is to ask the simple question: who benefits? Why was this being done?
Yeah.
And
So the question is, who benefits from this? And the second question in relation to what you say about the power of the media is not whether or not the media has power. It's whether or not the media is fair, is transparent, and just.
they're not. They're not. They
So
have proven them.
in whose interest is the free media in America working for?
There's no
Yeah.
such thing as a free media in America. There's controlled media, there's corporate media. Free media is what you're doing right now. Free media is what engages in social dialogue on TikTok, or the last bit of it on TikTok, the independent journalists. There is no such thing as free media. I think that the to the uninformed, ill-informed, and unwilling to learn, they will believe the marketed viewpoint that the United States has a robust media system that is free and open. When you have two or three corporations that own all of the media outlets in this country, I fail to see how the media is free. When you have oligarchs that purchase media companies, all on the behalf and at the behest of a foreign nation, to prevent social dialogue and to prevent the moral conflict that it obviously exists, and to prevent conversations around that, I don't think that you can call that a free media system. It is anything but that.
Yeah, but the to counter that position, and what some people will say is that you can say all of this, that the media is not free, it's not transparent, and there's this idea that there's a man on suit behind the scene that is controlling some of these media conglomerates. But the thing there is that they did provide this evidence, they did put out the information out there. So if the media is not free and is controlled like you're making it out to be, why put out this information? They could have as well redact everything and claim that they are redacting everything for national security purpose.
Sure. So it's very, people aren't necessarily, I don't know if people are going to understand this, but I want to be clear. What you're viewing right now is the sacrifice that the system is willing to make. These people understand when you get into the top levels of power
Hmm.
and you decide to take that oath, you decide to have that handshake, you decide to engage in the level of disgust and pedophilia that you have seen illustrated in those files, you understand that you are no bigger than the program.
Hmm.
And if the program needs to sacrifice you for its survival, they will do it. The
Hmm.
program must survive above you. So, what you're seeing right now is simply just the system protecting itself and saying that we need it. no pun intended, but we need a sacrifice. So these are the sacrificial lambs that the system is willing to produce. Sure, some of them are going to have some level of contention. Maybe not all of them are guilty. But I want to be very clear, Sab, and for your viewers that are going to watch this, anybody who is a parent, anybody who has a moral compass, right? If you're included in those files, I wouldn't include you at all in my life. I wouldn't let my children around you. I wouldn't trust you one single bit at all. These people
Yeah.
are the most powerful and so called most intelligent people in the world. They knew
Mm.
who this man was, they knew what he was about, and they still engaged with him. They just
Yeah.
never thought that he would get caught.
All right, let's quickly take a look at this. This is according to the Associated Press. Newly disclosed Epstein documents offer more details about his interaction with the rich and famous. So if you go down a little bit here, you see that the documents released on Friday, include Epstein's communications with former White House advisors, NFL team co-owner, and billionaires, including Bill Gates and Elon Musk. President Donald Trump's Justice Department said it will be releasing more than 3 million pages of documents, along with more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images under a law intended to reveal most of the material in it, collected during 2 decades of investigating the wealthy financier. So again, back to the point, if the media is as controlled, if the media is as uh, detached from the general public and just doing the bidding of the elites, why would they put out all this name? Elon Musk, Bill Clinton, and all these people, and even President Trump. We saw a video with him, and his association with Jeffrey Epstein and a host of other bigwigs that were mentioned in these files. If the media
And
is as controlled, why do
sure,
this?
sure. So when did that article come out? When did that article come out? What was the date?
Uh, okay, I put it back up again. I think it came. The date on this is I think January 31st, 2026.
And when were the files released?
The files were released, I think, on the 1st or 2nd of February.
Okay. So they had time to look it up. And again, for anybody who's going to watch this after the fact, right? I just told you that the system is the number one priority, and maintaining that system is the number one priority. What you're viewing is the sacrificial lambs. I'll give you an example to further elaborate. You see how in the article they mentioned the NFL team owner
Mm.
that's included in that? The NFL team owner, from the disclosure that we learned, is Dan Snyder, the former owner of the Washington Redskins. Okay? For those of the people that are not aware, and I'm here in DC, the Redskins are one of the most profitable teams in all the NFL. That's number one. So ask yourself something. Just, you don't have to be a billionaire businessman to understand this. You have one of the most profitable teams in the NFL. Would you really sell it if it's making you so much money? You wouldn't.
Absolutely not.
When Dan Snyder decided to sell his team, I remember it being on the news and on ESPN, and everyone was saying, "Why on earth would you sell such a team like this? It's such an asset." And everybody was lined up to try to buy it. This is an example of how the power structure and the communication structure functions. Dan Snyder, because now it's very simple to surmise that, well, he knew that these disclosures were going to come out. And
Mhm.
he would have to sell his NFL team because the NFL would be empowered to take over that team and put it in receivership. And he could potentially lose billions if that occurred. So he sold the team before all of this happened to make his exit. Okay? Because he knew this was going to occur. Now, the direct complicity and the obfuscation that I told you about before that CNN applies is that they had access to these documents. They have the same AI tools that you and I have. They know that Dan Snyder is in those files. They know that he's mentioned in those files, and they didn't mention that in their story. They didn't. They purposely left him out. And there's a reason for that. It's because there are still vestiges of the power structure where they're going to try to protect those people that are in positions of affluence. That's what they do until it becomes unattainable where they have to mention him. They're going to do their best to deny, deflect, which is what they're doing right now. And they're going
Mhm.
to try to drill down on people like Bill Gates. They already know Bill Gates isn't liked because of the vaccine. They already know Elon Musk isn't liked. These are their sacrificial lambs.
Yeah. So, and you're saying that the omission of his name is deliberate. They could just say former NFL team owner, stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, from a liability standpoint, because I know that somebody might say, well, they don't want to get sued. Every single person that's media trained, every single journalist, every single editor knows this one thing. If you're making an allegation, right, you can say alleged. You could
Mhm.
put footnotes in the article. You can do things to make sure that the potential for a lawsuit never comes up. However, what's in those files is damning to Dan Snyder. There is
Mhm.
direct evidence of what it is that he did. There's direct evidence of where he was. There's direct evidence of everything that occurred and what he did to those children, not semi adults, to children.
Yeah. And the fact that they omitted his name is deliberate. So let's go back to another point that I really quickly want to touch on, which is there is evidence being put out there that minors were molested allegedly. I mean, I'm trying to follow the same line, and then and that the one of the persons still alive today that is being directly accused of doing that is Ghislaine Maxwell, and she's still in custody. I don't know. I think the Trump government did a deal, or the DOJ, the Department of Justice, did a deal with her, but she's still remanded in custody for whatever reason. So if we have established that Ghislaine Maxwell is guilty and that she trafficked some of these minors to these powerful people, and the names they are just putting out there is this former NFL owner and Bill Gates, and what's the other one? And
Yeah.
Elon Musk and a few other names we've seen. What is stopping the Department of Justice from going after these people and prosecuting them? What is really going on in America?
So let's be clear, these people are morally coward and they're just cowards in general. I know the weak ones when I see them. And the system or the Department of Justice specifically, they understand that to indict some of these people could potentially bring down the house of cards. That is what we call our government,
Mhm.
because there's a level of disclosure that would have to occur. You
You
can't sit
can't
there
sit
and
there.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Okay. You can't
So,
sit there and say that everything is because of national security when there are things that are open at trial. Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail for trafficking. Trafficking to whom? There has to be an end user. The end user has been disclosed in these files. Again, this is not up for debate. This is not my opinion. I am reading things that are directly coming from the FBI themselves, that are coming from direct witness testimony. So let's assume that let's just throw a number out there and say that there's 100 different people, even though there's more. But let's assume that there's 100 different allegations or 100 allegations in general. Are we going to say that all of them are fake? Are we going to say that all of them are lies? Even if you reach the bar of 50%, half of them are lies. That leaves you another 50%.
mhm.
50% of the most powerful people in the world that are responsible for making laws and passing legislation and are in control of finance, healthcare, industry in our country are engaged in pedophilia and blackmail on behalf of a foreign country. This is what the evidence shows. This man was working for the Israeli government or on the behalf of the Israeli government as an asset.
Yeah.
That is what he did.
So let me read this to you real quick. Inside these millions of pages are FBI notes, interviews, summaries, emails, flight records, court filings, internal memoranda, and unverified allegations. Some mundane, some disturbing, and some politically explosive. Among the names mentioned thousands of times is the former and current US president, meaning Clinton and Trump. I mean, allegedly, they, they have they have obviously left the names out. So there are references to billionaires, royalty, politicians, intelligence linked figures, very important, and media power brokers. But there is the most important thing to understand from the beginning, which are the three key points we must understand. Being mentioned in these files does not mean guilty. An allegation recorded is not the same as an evidence proven. And silence from authorities does not equal innocence either. So I think this counters your point that, well, there's an end user and people have been mentioned and so on and so forth. So what they're saying is being mentioned in these files does not mean that they're guilty. And secondly, an allegation recorded is not the same as an evidence proven. So
Mhm.
you still have to go to court and to prove beyond reasonable doubt that these people committed these crimes,
Sure,
even though we have seen
sure.
some evidence being banded out there that they committed crime, and we're having these media trials, more or less.
So I don't disagree with you. I think that we can say under normal circumstances that this should be the process. I don't think that any reasonable person would disagree with me. However, this is not a normal process. This is not a normal crime. This is one of the most extreme crimes that you can engage in.
Mm.
Pedophilia, rape, treason. To me, all things that are punishable by death. I don't, and I want to be very clear on my stance. I don't want to assign my statements to you at all. I'll give a moniker of grace and say, you know what? From 2010 and back,
Mhm,
we'll somewhat look past. But
mhm.
from 2011 till now, I don't want a trial. You have proven in these files that the rule of law, again, this is not my words, this
Yeah.
is their words. The rule of law does not apply to us. That's for Goyim, not my words, Jeffrey Epstein's words.
And who's a goyim?
Well, under their religious jargon, a Goyim is a non human. They view you and I, or anyone who is not Ashkenazi Jew, as non human animals, cattle,
So
to
you're
be
saying
killed.
that in one of these files that Jeffrey Epstein alluded to.
No, he didn't allude. Let's be clear. He very clearly stated the, and I'm stating it verbatim. The rule of law does not apply to us. That is for Goyim. Those are
Well,
his words.
I've not seen some of these documents. You know,
Sure,
I've gone through some of them and now, try to pull
sure,
up. But what one thing we've seen is videos of him playing around with people that look like minor little kids, and in this palace where he's playing around and running with these little kids, most of them uh little girls. And yeah, that's really disturbing. So let's go to the next point, which is the point that people are making, that something that big is about to happen, and that this the release of this Epstein file could be a distraction. It could be uh, a point, whether you agree with that, and this is what I want to test, this hypothesis, that the government is flooding out this information to distract people from something else, maybe a war with Iran. Who knows? Maybe it could be something else going on. It could be in a lead up to midterm elections. Is the government using this as a ploy, as a strategy to distract the people again?
sure. I can very easily believe that. I'm not. I don't think that that's beyond the pale of understanding, right? But again, that just gives more credence to my position that the entire system is corrupted. Any government, any institution that would engage in something like this, that would, one, destroy the sanctity of children on the behalf of a foreign nation like Israel in order to go to war with another nation that would cost the lives of millions and also bankrupt this country, that is a system that should not stand. And the American public is derelict in their duty in forgetting the history of how this nation was founded. It was built on revolution, and the government is currently skirting on that very, very thin line. Very thin.
So some people would say, well, let's give credit to President Trump. At least he had the cojones, he had the balls, pardon my French, to release these files. That this investigation have gone on for far too long, for better part of 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. So the fact that he dared to release them, following through on his campaign promise, should be applauded. This is what some of his followers are saying. What's your take on that?
Let's be very clear here. I'm going to give you an example. I take it, it's flattering to me when people tell me, JP, you're a good dad. In my mind, I say, what? But overtly, I say thank you. I appreciate the compliment. But in my
Mhm.
mind, deep down, you're supposed to be a good dad. Okay? You don't get a trophy for being a good dad. That's what you're supposed to be. Okay? What we're doing essentially is giving him a trophy for doing what he should have done. And the fact that he was trying to delay and denying the veracity of the information that was in those files, and then he also redacted gross amounts of information of people that are complicit in those files, and the government of Israel, which is complicit in those files, he is just as guilty. I want to be clear. If person A is engaged in pedophilia, and then person B is protecting them, and person C is trying to tell you, hey, let's calm down a little bit. A, B, and C should be hung.
Mhm.
I am very clear. I have no moral problems with this fact. I believe, and you're talking to somebody who's virtually 99% against the death penalty. The 1% that I reserve it for is this.
Yeah,
Again, very
and
clear in my
yeah,
position.
yeah. Not to interrupt you, and again, to what you said about the delay and the processes and how long it took for this government to release them. So the DOJ and the FBI have been accused by the Democrats, and this is not about partisan politics, of redacting a lot of the files and missing the deadline, which was set by Congress, which was supposed to be on the 19th of December 2025. And one of the arguments they made is that the files were about 6 million, and that they were, you know, things that they could not release because of national security risk, and also that there were medical records of some people that they couldn't put out. There were information that were linked to minors that they wouldn't want to put out. So they had a lot of job to do, and they had this involved in a very cumbersome process. So even though some are saying, oh, this was delayed and so on and so forth, but we still have the files. They were still released for the public to see. What
Correct.
else can this government do to make people happy?
So, my position on this is not going to be popular. Okay. If you're looking at this from a national security standpoint,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to look at it from the same standpoint as the American government. Classification doesn't come from the information that you have. Classification, or the reason for classification, has to deal with sources and methods. You don't want whoever's reading or seeing the information or the product to be able to understand or know or reverse engineer how it is that you captured such information. That is where the basis, it's not all of it, but that is the basis of classification. It deals with sources and methods. If I am dealing in a world where I am concerned about national security, the
Hmm.
information that's been released thus far shows that the judicial, the legislative, and the economic branches of this government are totally and completely corrupted, and they are subject to control from a foreign government. That is a national security risk. This is where my position is unpopular. The people in those files, I am sorry that they would have to get doxxed. But for the basis of national security to protect this country going forward, all the information should be unredacted and a full release of all of those files so that we can understand fully who is guilty and who is not guilty should be released. If you can redact the names, so be it, but that's not the number one priority. The number one priority is making sure that that information is cleanly disseminated so that the American people can find out what has been going on in their name. Because we've seen just in the last 20 years, without these disclosures, we've seen what these politicians have done in the name of American citizens, and we are paying the price for it, and the global community is also paying the price for it. So I'm of the mindset that the redactions and the privacy matters are completely secondary, if not third, in my opinion.
Yes. Thank you very much. As we come to the end of part one of the conversation, when we come back for part two, the other questions I'll be asking you will be about who's Jeffrey Epstein, who is he working for, and a host of other points that we will need to address in part two. Um, yeah, thank you so much for joining. For those of you that are watching from around the world, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube. Leave questions if you have any questions for our guest, Tailpipe. I will also be looking at the comments. Don't forget to share this on your story in different groups and different platforms if you like. And yes, we have an important guest with us today, Tailpipe. So we'll continue part two in a minute. Yeah, I need to get water. 1 second.
I had mine over here.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. We are live on YouTube, guys. So you can join us for part two of the conversation. We'll be talking about the profile of the man himself, Jeffrey Epstein, his background, um, and there's also information being put out there that he's working for XYZ. We'll also be asking questions about, you know, other international happenings, including what is going on with Iran, the situation in Venezuela, and a host of other issues. So we're live here on YouTube. Welcome back to part two of this conversation. So in this second part, it's important for us to also talk about how this all started. Who is Jeffrey Epstein? Tell us, a thing or two you know about him, and tell us
Sure,
about his profile. Who's
sure.
Jeffrey Epstein?
So one of the most interesting things, Jeffrey Epstein he's from what we believe an American citizen who is of Jewish religious background, and he came up within the ranks of New York City in the most powerful areas of the city. And it's an interesting thing because my older cousin, she went to the Dalton School. This is a school where he was somehow allowed to be a teacher. This is a school, just to understand, it takes some of the best teachers in the world and it employs them. In the average tuition for this school is around $45,000, $50,000. Imagine sending your child to school for tuition 40, $50,000 for the second and third grade. Like, you have to have a level of pedigree to you in order to teach at the Dalton school. And he was not her teacher, but when she was there, he was there as a teacher also. And she was telling me that she can't believe how, this degrees of separation, how close it was. Again, William Barr's father was her principal, so she knew him. And she also happened to work in two White House administrations, but neither here nor there. Jeffrey Epstein was able, through his religious affiliation, to become an asset of Israel at the end of the day. I'm sure that there are things in between there, but his ability to work for Goldman Sachs, despite not having a finance background, and somehow being able to be of financing some of the largest projects of infrastructure, of business, of medical, of education. How, I don't know. He is a classic example of white privilege where you get to fail and still succeed in some way, shape, or form. Because no one can tell you how they understand it. But when you look at the files, you very clearly understand it. He was a nefarious actor who used sex and blackmail to get what he wanted. And the Israeli government saw that. And in my belief, based off of what I see, based off of my experience, he became an intelligence asset. And it's very, very simple. The Israeli government said this is something that we could easily do. We can go fund this guy to the tune of maybe 10, $20 million
Mhm.
and see where it goes. He took that 10 and $20 million, flipped it, and was able to use it to blackmail individuals like he did. And as that blackmail power grew, so did the money that he took in. And he became self sustaining to where if you had to peel this back and look, you would never see necessarily state involvement
Yeah.
in the sense that Israel is directly involved. However, the work product that he derived and the information, and again, this is in the files, he funded companies in Silicon Valley that were directly there only to steal and engage in corporate espionage. And he took that information and fed it back to Israel. This is not my opinion. This is the evidence that's being shown in the files.
And when how can we establish, when this relationship with Israel started? Did it begin, from the early days of his career as a teacher, or when he became a financier? How did it, is it like a startup? How did this begin? This whole relationship with Israel?
So there's a
And
two-way street in intelligence, right? The
Mhm.
two-way street meaning that in this is just how I assess things on a broad scale. To be Jewish means that you're a part of their system. You might not want to be a part of it, and that's fine, but that's a one-way street where you can choose to go down, maybe, but they can definitely go down. And they will always have access to you so long as you maintain that religious affiliation or that religious identity. That is just how it functions. So, when did it start? When he was born. When did it cultivate is the better question. Where it cultivated, when it cultivated, I think you could arguably say from the Dalton School in the 70s and 80s. Because how do you get access to that school and to the pedigree to become a formal teacher there when you have zero credentials to be allowed for? It's like me saying, hey, Sav, I'm going to send you to go work for Doctors Without Borders to go around the world to be a doctor. But you have no medical experience. You have no medical background. You just know I have my left leg and my right leg. And that's all you know. But
Mhm.
somehow you're going to be a doctor. Well, that's the same thing with Jeffrey Epstein here. No different.
Yes. So, and this whole talk about his connection to Israel, the thing is that people say all of that, but nobody can really substantiate that. Where does it? Did he have contact with people in Israel that are, of the political class? Did he have contact with people from the UK, including, the reports that Prince Andrew, and I'm seeing this news right now that Prince Andrew will be asked to testify before Congress or something like that. Andrew under pressure to give evidence on Epstein, and that Bill and Hillary Clinton to testify to congressional Epstein probe. So he met with a lot of very powerful people, not just in America, but around the world. So why are people so hyper focused on Israel? It seems like an obsession with Israel. People cannot see Epstein for who he is. And this is the question most people are asking. Why can't you guys, everybody, see Epstein for who he is? Why the attempt to connect him to Israel?
Sure. So two things can be true. Two things can be true. He could be a horrible person and still benefit the nation state of Israel. Like that, two things can be true. But let's qualify your question. Let's assume that you're not going to have 100%. 100% meaning he has a membership card that identifies him as a Mossad agent, and you have just clear and compelling evidence that shows that he is just absolutely 100% officially a part of the Israeli government. Let's assume that you won't have that, right? At its most basic level, you have that far extreme. At the other end of the extreme, you have no evidence. None at all. We're not at zero at all whatsoever. So let's qualify and work our way up to 100.
Mhm.
Jeffrey Epstein, very clearly it shows in his own words and in his own emails, in his own communications from the early stages of blackmail, the information that he was passing on in terms of corporate espionage was going directly to Israel. Now let's just say, okay, well, wait a second. Maybe he just loves Israel. Okay, you can love it. I love it too. He's giving sensitive information to a foreign nation. It's against the law. He's not picking China. He's not picking Uganda. He's not picking Brazil. He's only picking Israel to feed this information to. Let's go on another level now. Politically, he became so entrenched within the political world and in the world of academia, which tend to function one and the same. He took and blackmailed politicians, got them. And again, the basis for the blackmail, the
It's to
basis,
stop them.
it was
It,
to make sure that the geopolitical strategy of Israel first, was always maintained. Again, it wasn't for Uganda, it wasn't for Chile, it wasn't for Canada, it wasn't on behalf of any other nation except for Israel.
what if he was working for the, and again, I'm not in the business of doing hypothesis, but what if he was working for the CIA? He could be the asset of the CIA as well.
I'm not. Here's the thing, my love. I'm drawing the picture. I just gave you from the early stages, it was on behalf of Israel. I just gave you the mid stages, it was on behalf of Israel. Now let's go with the soft power. Every successive prime minister since the 90s, he has had direct contact with and direct communication with. They stayed at his house. The former head of Mossad stayed at his house. He was roommates with him. Ehud Barak would stay with him months at a time. There's literal pictures and videos of Ehud Barak going in there.
Mhm.
The FBI, in their own 10, I forgot the name of the file, but it's the lead agent that's responsible for formulating the basis of the investigation, basically drawing up a one pager. They very clearly said Jeffrey Epstein is compromised and is acting on behalf of Israel. These are not my words. These are the words of the lead agent of the FBI who has direct access to intelligence that we don't get a chance to see. And they're very clearly laying that out. So again, we're not at 100% where he has the membership card that says, hey, I'm part of Mossad and I joined in 1982. We don't have that. Okay. But I'm giving you all of this information for you to be able to say, at its bare minimum, and if you believe in United States legal jurisprudence, there's something called reasonable doubt. Is there enough information beyond a reasonable doubt that at a bare minimum, there should be an indictment? Because right now, sitting in jail, you can be convicted of conspiracy. So, Sav, you might not have been involved. You might not have had direct knowledge, but because you had the means, the motive, and the capability, you can be charged with conspiracy to commit a crime. We know for a fact
Wow.
that he transmitted sensitive information. We know for a fact that he worked on behalf of Israel to further their geopolitical strategy. And whether he was working with the CIA, to me, it's one and the same. If you have a government that has been corrupted by Israel the way our government has, at one point in time, everything converges and you become intermeshed and you can't separate yourselves. And this is where the United States is now. We have been so intertwined with this cancerous nation that we can't recognize the difference between our nation and our sovereignty and what's to our benefit and what's to Israel's benefit. You and I can recognize it, but the politicians in office refuse to, not because they can't, but they refuse to because they understand what it'll cost them if they do.
Yeah, but again, he had contacts with other leaders around the world. Okay, so that's one of the videos. You can clearly see him dancing with what appeared to look like a teenager, and in one of the videos that we've been seeing online. Yeah, but I was going to say, look, there were also video evidence clearly showing him in contact with leaders of the Arab world and leaders from other countries around the world. So what you're saying is that there's no possibility, there's no remote chance that he was working for those people, but there's overwhelming evidence, in your opinion, and from what has been released, and most of his contact were with people in the Israeli intelligence and within the Israeli system.
A
And
man of
then,
his stature works with different governments. Whatever he does, he could work with the government of Mali. He could work with the government of Libya for all I care, which again, Libya is in the files also, right? He could work
Mhm.
with all of those people. The question becomes, what is the beneficial byproduct that is passed on and who is it passed on to? In this case, he gets to take the reward of whatever monetary gains that he would potentially have, right? But the access, the information, the intelligence that leads up to that reward, it goes somewhere and it goes to the benefit of this small, tiny nation. That's
Mhm.
just what it does. When you actually look and read the files and you look at it from an intelligence standpoint, you very clearly see this is not towards the benefit of us. It's just not. And here's the other thing, even if it was towards the benefit of us, I don't want anything that has to deal with blackmailing a politician using child sex or blackmailing using rape, even if it was an adult. I don't want that. That is
Yeah,
not something that I want.
absolutely not. It's even from the morality standpoint, it's clearly, what not what I mean. I'm talking about statecraft and politics, and when you talk about morality, people tend to like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And we have clearly seen from this video released that even people at the highest level of leadership, including President Trump. And now, one other point I want us to touch on is, President Trump saying that the Epstein file absolved him. And this is what people very close to him have told him. He's saying, well, I've not seen all the files, but the people very close to me that are very knowledgeable told me there's nothing there in that file against you. And that he is now saying that some people lured him to even stand beside Epstein in order to have debt on him, and he's now going to sue them. What's your take on that? And President Trump, saber rattling about starting some sort of legal war with people, quote unquote, trying to drag his name into the mud.
Sure. So nobody's dragging his name into the mud. He's already in the pigsty and he's rolling in shit. The evidence very clearly proves it. And even if he wasn't in the Epstein files, which he is, right? You have a voluminous amount of information from decades from when he ran Miss America pageants. Not my words, Sav, his words. He would go back while teenage women, he would go backstage as they were undressing and watch their naked bodies. These are not my words, Sav. These are his words. I would grab them by the pussy. These are not my words. These are his words. So if that's not enough to get you to say, you know what? We have a guy that if this was my sister or my mother, he would have sexually assaulted them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough for people to say, I can't support that guy. The level of racism that he's engaged in, that's not enough for his people to say, I won't support him. That's not enough. Child molestation and rape is not enough for people to say, I won't support him. At that point in time, this is how you recognize you are in a cult where nothing the great leader does is wrong, up is down, left is right, and right is wrong, and wrong is right. You are in an inverted lifestyle, and you are a part of a cult. Period. The end.
And
And
looking at it from a real political perspective, how would you assess the way that this current government of Trump have managed this information? How he's been able to navigate through the mess and the mud, because there was a lot of pressure when he came in. He didn't want to hear questions about Epstein. And this is the same president that ran on the campaign promise that he was going to declassify them and some other files. Is going to put the information out there for everybody to see. And he said, oh, these are the Clintons, these are like, the people on the other side, and I'm going to put the information out there. When he became president, he found that it was, easier said than done. So how would you assess his ability as a politician to manage everything that is happening right now?
so from a political standpoint and from a media savvy standpoint, he's brilliant.
Mhm.
He is an anomaly. You might not like him, and that's fine, neither do I, right? But one thing that you cannot do is deny his capability to shape media and to get people on his side. He is incredibly charismatic in that regard. To you and I, he's an absolute idiot, or at least definitely to me, right? However,
I don't see him as an idiot. I
no,
don't
no,
think.
when I say idiot, I don't mean it in the sense of like he's an invalid and can't understand 2 plus 2. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Everything down to his repetition, everything down to the way he shifts conversations, that shows a level of skill and capability that you can't always learn in school or you can't always learn from intel agencies. That is incredibly, incredibly strong and powerful. However, where I think that he falls in the world of idiocy is the preconceived notions where he calls places like Haiti shithole countries. In its name, he's sort of right. But what I don't like is that he doesn't say why they're shithole countries or why they became that. And
Mhm.
he doesn't allude or explain because he also doesn't know. Because in his world, he can't believe that white people would do what they do. Or if he can believe it, the way he looks at it is the same way as Venezuela. I have every right to take what's yours because I need it. When you've gone through life and nobody tells you no,
Hmm.
you believe that everything is yours. And that is very clearly what's on display. That's why he has no respect for the rule of law. He does what he wants and functions like a strongman. And his actions, and I want to be clear, Trump is the result of Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and George W. Bush and successive presidents. This is what the system has vomited up. And this is what we have to deal with. Trump is the inevitable consequence. You could remove Trump and put somebody else. It would be the same thing that we have here. This is the fall of the empire. This is what we are watching. I want to be very, very, very clear about that.
Yeah. Speaking of Haiti, which is a conversation you that would you know that you and I had before. One of the biggest U.S. embassies in the Western Hemisphere is in Haiti, and yet people, these political figures in America, and even here some people, MAGA leaning guys, talking about Haiti as a shithole country. So if Haiti was a shithole country, what is America's interest in Haiti? Economically and politically, if it was shithole, why don't you just ignore them and leave them alone?
So, this is something that I know intimately because, as you know, I am Haitian and my family was exiled in the 80s. Um, Haiti, Haiti
Was
is a
this
part
was this by
of,
the Duvaliers?
correct. Haiti is a part of the Haiti is a part of the Monroe Doctrine, in the sense that the United States Monroe Doctrine has said that they will have control and overarching supremacy of the Western Hemisphere and the other nations in their region, and they will dominate and control them. So that involves the entire Caribbean and Latin America and the Northern Territory of Canada. Period. The end. That has been the stated doctrine since that time, since its founding of the Monroe Doctrine. And the United States, and this is not about Trump, this is just in general, the United States has maintained that Haiti will not rise. And there's multiple reasons for that. And that's because Haiti is the first independent and free Black nation. The consequences of showing that a thriving nation like that can come about is detrimental to the world order. You saw it happen in Grenada when they took down their prime minister. It was very clearly articulated in CIA documents. The danger that Grenada posed was that the population of Grenada, being a Latin American country and predominantly Black and English speaking, they could communicate directly with the Black Americans in the United States. That is a position that is unattainable and cannot be maintained. So this is why Haiti will not rise. The policy around Haiti has shifted and changed a little bit, and I've articulated this before on other podcasts and other lives that deal with Haitian geopolitics. And you have a system where the United States has passed on the responsibility of managing Haiti. They've passed it on to the Dominicans. So the white oligarch class of Dominican Republic serves as the managerial class of Haiti. So at level one, you have the oligarch class of Haiti, which tend to be mulattoes or white passing Haitians. They are managed somewhat and superficially by the Dominicans. And at the top level or the third level is the United States, which maintains overarching control. Haiti has the second largest oil reserves in the Caribbean. It's something that's not spoken about. It's what brought down the Duvalier government. When we began to explore, and I know this directly because my father was best friends with Jean-Claude Duvalier. My father's name is also Jean-Claude. They used to call them the twins because they both had the same name, same haircut, same style, same everything. My father, oil executives from, I forgot what company it is, but I have it on video recorded when he first told us the story, where one of the oil executives, it was him and Jean-Claude Duvalier specifically and only. He told them to meet him at an area in Haiti called La Gonave. And at La Gonave in Haiti, this is where they found out that Haiti had a massive oil reserve. Jean Claude Duvalier thought that the United States was altruistic and they would be benevolent and say, wow, what a wonderful economic opportunity. He sent a cable through the State Department letting them know that they needed assets from ExxonMobil and Chevron and the others to help explore because they found that they have a large oil reserve. About a week later, a State Department official came that my father knew. And to hear my father tell the story, it's chilling. He came with a manila envelope to hand to Jean Claude Duvalier, but he couldn't find Jean Claude Duvalier. So he went to my father to ask him where he was. And my father was asked to deliver the message. My father refused. And the gentleman just smiled because he knew that my father knew what was in that envelope. About a month later, it began the precipitous decline and the overthrow of the Duvalier government. What was in that letter was very specific, my father said when he read it with Jean-Claude Duvalier. You are to cease and terminate all exploration activity and not mention this to anyone. And your oil rights do not belong to the Haitian people or government. They are a product of the United States government.
Yeah.
That is
When
why
you say when you
the
say United States government, you're referring to ExxonMobil and Chevron, and
well, the corporate interests at the end of the day, but again, whatever the beneficial corporate class is, it belongs to them. It does not belong to that sovereign nation. It belongs to them, and that's the same thing that you see in Venezuela now. Their oil, Trump has very clearly said, their oil is ours.
you know what people say about like the oil deposits in the Caribbean? They said Haiti probably have more oil deposits than even Venezuela, because the claim is that it sits on four tectonic plates. This is why it's very
Supposedly,
susceptible to earthquakes and tremors and so on and so forth. And there's also gold. There was even a report that came out. I think it was, I don't know, 2010 or something like that, that the U.S. was digging earth from one of the mountains on one of the island, and what they were digging out is called iridium. And not a lot of Haitians know this. Not a lot of people in that follow Haitian politics even care to know about it. So this iridium, they say, happens to be a very rare earth mineral that is used for making spacecraft because it is heat resistant. And that I think you can find it in two or three places around the world, and Haiti happen to have abundance of it. So yeah, you're right. So, and then when they say Haiti is a shithole country, just like they say about Nigeria, and
yeah.
President Trump is saying that, it's just blatant racism. These guys are, they clearly know what they're doing. If these countries are so shithole, why do you care about them? Why do you have armies, stationed in those places for economic benefit? So
Why do you
one other,
constantly overthrow them? Like,
yeah,
why
what do you
would you
consider
do that?
overthrow the regime? Because speaking of the Duvaliers, remember they think they took out Papa Doc, and they were the ones that actually supported Baby Doc Duvalier. And when the regime was overthrown, I think they flew him out there, time after time. Bertrand Aristide, what's his name? There's this one called it's Leslie Francois Maniga. I think he stayed for a period of 6 months or 9 months. So Haiti is just you guys face exactly the same thing in Haiti as we face in Africa.
I mean,
Constant.
just basically, just look at the basics of it, and it gives credence to what I just said. Why would you want to overthrow Baby Doc and have a system that would elect a socialist priest that then went and said that they wanted reparations from the French? That's
Mhm.
not something that the United States wanted. But they've never been very good. They've been very good at overthrowing governments. They've never been good at what happens after. And they would have much rather have kept Baby Doc in office than to keep Jean-Claude Duvalier, or to put
Absolutely.
Aristide in office and keep
Mhm.
him in office.
Mhm.
But because of the mineral foundations, they
Mhm.
could not keep him in office. That was a position that they could not risk or take, because to allow Haiti to engage in extraction would mean that you had an oil producing country that is in the Caribbean, that
Mhm.
they could use that revenue to
Yeah.
platform their people. And that's not something that could be allowed.
Mhm. And speaking of John Bertrand Aristide, I don't want to dwell too much on Haiti. It's somebody that those of us that follow international politics, familiar with, because he spent a lot of time in exile in South Africa. And then, because most of us are Christians, like, there was this whole thing about him being laicized, the process of laicization, because as a Catholic priest, he decided to join politics and then became the president of Haiti. Yeah, which I found very interesting as a Catholic myself. And but let's talk about Venezuela. Gangster style method, or whatever you call it. The Americans went into Venezuela and extracted the president and his wife, and they brag about it's like, yeah, it has not been narcos all along. The Venezuelans have oil, and we need it. We need to control the oil. And this is what Trump said. And again, people look at Trump and say, oh, Trump is, very arrogant, he's this and that. But this is the first time in modern history that those of us on the outside looking in are saying, hang on a second, this guy is actually saying it as it is. Well, if we had Obama there, then we could have a million platitudes and oh, democracy and human rights, and universal values. And this might be the argument. If Biden or Obama or George Bush or anybody could have done that, but Trump is very blatant. This is what we want to do. We want your oil. And anytime I see Trump making this statement, we see ExxonMobil, we see the leaders of Chevron, we see the leaders of Halliburton. Who's the real power stay in American politics? Is it the president? Is it the political elite? Or is it the economic elites?
It's the economic elites, because even when you look at the meeting that Chevron and all of the other oil barons had at the White House, if you look at their postulations, if you look at how they sit, if you look at how they don't talk like they're in control per se. Instead, you have to look at around the room. You have to look at who else was in that room. And it was the financial elite, the bankers that were in that meeting, that would have to underwrite the majority of the projects that would be going on in that country. And the capital that would be risked if they did, because the Venezuelans would not allow their country to become another Iraq. They will fight to the death. They fundamentally will. And they knew, and based off of CIA intelligence reports, very clearly indicated you would be engaged in a long form, protracted guerrilla war. I know this directly because I have friends that are at the Pentagon, and I have friends that work for these agencies that are prior special operators. And it
Mhm.
is not something that the United States would want to engage in, which is why you've seen Trump backtrack and say, you know what, we're going to work a deal out with them. But even then, it's rampant corruption. Nowhere is it allowed for the president of the United States to have control of his own bank account or slush fund where he can divert funds. There's a reason why there's a separation of power. There's a reason why Congress is the one who allocates funds. He's in direct violation of the Constitution.
Yeah, and you're right, because you see, these guys are not just billionaires. These guys are trillionaires. We don't even know the extent of their wealth. And you have them in Nigeria. You have them in Equatorial Guinea. These are the guys that run. And anytime there's a government that comes that's socialist in orientation, an attempt to touch them. There's one thing that is fundamental to American interests and policies, particularly international, in terms of their relations with other nation states, is the economic interest. That is the reason why they overthrow government. This is the reason why they keep dictators in place. This is why they go to any length, and we can clearly see it happening in Venezuela and likely to happen in Iran. While everybody is protesting and dancing and saying, "Oh, down with the regime," and so on and so forth, the guys that are making the real decision are there. These are the same guys: Halliburton, Chevron, British Petroleum from the UK, Shell from, these guys are the ones that sit down and decide what will happen. So it's all about interest, but it's the messaging, it's how they design the messaging in order to get public support, and it's very, very interesting. What is your take on the American, attempt at expedition in Iran? Do you think President Trump will follow through on his threat to take down the regime? What do you think will happen? And what if he doesn't do that? What will happen to the regime in Iran? Are the Israelis willing to lead the fight? Is it doable? Iran is a country of over 90 million people.
Correct. And it's a country that's 2.5 to 3 times the size of Iraq. And it has a different terrain. It's mountainous in many areas. You are not just walking into Iran. It is a nightmare for a standing army. It has vast flatlands where if you decide that you want to pop up an air base or some type of garrison station,
It's a
you
sitting
are
duck.
open. You are opened at every single angle to attack. You are they're staunchly nationalistic. They've seen what happened to their neighbor. You cannot commit ground forces there. Even if you tried to, they would be decimated, and it would finally signal the death of the American empire, to be honest with you. And at a consequential risk to Israel, which they don't talk about, but you can go on open source and see the pictures that were taken. The strikes that Iran ignited on Israel, it was detrimental. It was
Okay.
detrimental that the
I
Israelis came to them to call and say, "Hey, let's get a ceasefire."
Yeah, I saw a video of a guy, of a Jordanian journalist. They said, look, during the first 2 days of the operation, the Israelis, that he could see something that looked like, the skyline was like the stars. And you have this Israeli defense system knocking down Iranian, what looked like drones and, missiles, of all sorts being fired from Iran. But from day four, they could hear it landing with increasing accuracy. And that the tremor, because the missiles are so large, and this is why Trump is also pressuring them, and the Israelis are very insistent on curbing Iranian ballistic missile program. Because at the beginning of the conflict, you see the Iranians were sending in some of the low level systems, and they were being knocked down from the sky. But from day four and day five, you could see that the Iranians were landing. Yeah, but having said that, this journalist said, that even them in Jordan, because these two countries are in proximity to each other, they could hear the impact, it's tremor. So it's devastating. And this is not a round that the Israelis want to go through again. And of course, the political elites are saying, let's do it. This is the time or never to destroy Iran, to take down the government. Even if it is at the cost of 5, 10 million people in Iran, let's do it. And they don't want to do it on their own. They want to do it with the United States of America, with boots on the ground, because bombing from the sky is not going to solve the problem. I mean, even if you kill the supreme leader, there's a succession plan. There's somebody else that's going to take charge. And even if you're able to decimate the leadership in that country, you have ragtag militias that are going to proliferate the whole area. And now in Iraq, in Basra, in the south, in places like Najaf and Karbala, you have hardened, hostile Ashabi fighters, or what they call the Popular Mobilization Forces, over 250,000 strong. And
And they,
this guy,
and I can guarantee you, having served in Iraq, those forces, they're battle trained, okay? They've had 20 years of war and have been engaged in active combat. I was in the military. The majority of the people that I served with, they're currently retired or retiring now. So we don't have a combat trained force at all. So we would be sending in what are called green feet into combat against a group of guys that have
battle
20
tested.
years experience behind their belt, and they have the geographical terrain advantage, and those people will cross that border to go fight on behalf of Iranians, guaranteed, because over 1 million Iraqis were
Mhm.
exterminated, which was a genocide in my opinion, because of that illegal war. And if you think for 1 second that their countrymen and those family members won't go to get their revenge, you got another thing coming to you.
Yeah, and it's also important to know that Iran and Iraq have these ties going back to the 80s, because what happened in the 80s, that when America supported through Donald Rumsfeld, and they declassified information to show this, that the US was supporting Saddam, because the revolution in Iran happened in 79, and there was the hostage crisis that happened in the American embassy in Tehran. and then they supported Saddam in the war, that happened, for 2 years. Over 2 million or so people died during the war. And during that time period, a lot of Shia were crossing from Iraq because Saddam had persecuted those Shia that were living in the south, even in Baghdad, in what is now known today as Sadr City. It used to be called Saddam City. This is where the downtrodden, the lower class of the Shia were living, and these are the boys of the Mahdi army, that emerged,
Mhm.
through Muqtada al-Sadr. And
Mhm.
these guys were going there to fight. They were going there to fight with Iran. So their affiliation is more to Iran, even though they are Iraqis, through their religious connection, because most of them are Usuli 12ers, and they are very, very militant and devout, Shia, and to them, an attack on Iran, which is supported, whether you like or not, the Saudis are saying now that, oh, they are not, willing to see this happen, but the Saudis have been at the forefront of this rhetoric for years now, saying, oh, America has to destroy them because the Iran, is creating problems in the region. And so there's a lot of layers to this. And this is why, if America, and I'm sure that the State Department and the Pentagon, they're doing the risk assessment, because Trump truly believes that he can go there and do 5 airstrikes and go home. And I know he has that sort of restraint. But the issue with Iran is doing 5 airstrikes is not going to make things better. Iran is not Venezuela that that he did that and he succeeded and okay, somebody else took over power. For instance, if you kill the supreme leader, who is seen as one of the, if not the leader of Shias, it's not just the political leader of Iraq, he's the spiritual leader of Shia in Iran, in Iraq, in Lebanon, Alawis in Syria, Zaydis in Yemen, Shias in Saudi Arabia. So it will ignite a regional conflict. And
So is
again,
it fair to say, Sav,
mhm,
is it fair to say that based off of what you were just saying, there would really be no interest for the United States to launch this attack?
absolutely not.
Okay. So now the question that we originally posed when we first started this, who benefits?
Well, the Israelis are saying that the only country that they stand up and challenge their power in the region is Iran, and they want it destroyed. They've been saying it for.
Because the Israelis have a stated policy that they will have no near peer competitors in their region. That
Mhm,
is their policy. And again, I want you to think about something. You're in your neighborhood. You have one neighbor, or correction, you have seven neighbors,
mhm.
and you have only one neighbor that is constantly fighting with everyone. At what point in time do you no longer blame the other six and say, you know what? It's got to be this seventh guy. What is the problem with him? Why isn't Israel, or excuse me, why isn't Lebanon fighting with Syria? Why isn't Lebanon fighting with Turkey? Why isn't Egypt fighting with Syria? Why isn't Egypt fighting with Lebanon? Why? Why aren't they fighting with Iran?
Yeah,
Why
but
is it no
the
one else?
Israelis, yeah, but
No
the
one.
Israelis. Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. The Israelis will argue that, hang on a second, you're saying this because it's easier for you to say that they're living in a neighborhood, an environment that they are not welcome because of the history and how they came back. People have been constantly saying that you're not from here, you're not indigenous, you need to leave. And if you don't leave, we'll destroy you. And that they have attacked them on numerous occasions. And there's evidence to prove that the neighbors around the region have attacked Israel before. And therefore, Israel is making sure that that doesn't happen again.
What evidence is there to prove that? Because the 67-day war, again, this is not my conjecture.
Mhm.
If you read the book by Miko Peled, where he gained access to the Israeli archives, the 67 war, that was started by Israel. So what figment of their imagination is it that people don't want them in the neighborhood? Yes, you're right to an extent that they're not indigenous.
Yeah, but
When you
The Israelis will argue again. I'm playing the devil's advocate. The Israelis will argue that in 1947, after the partition plan had came in December until the independence in 48, that some of those Arab countries will not accept what the UN
Yes,
and
because
their.
they are a colonial power. They gained that land through violence and colonialism. It was very clear. Again, this is not up for their Israeli debate. Their own prime minister, their founding prime minister Ben Gurion, very clearly said, "We are a settler colonial project, and we must remove the Arabs from this land. This is not a war of independence, it is a war of colonialism. They import people from Europe and the United States to occupy and keep land. That is what they do, which is why they've had a net negative migration this year because of the war.
Yeah, but you
It's
can
not,
understand that.
excuse me?
You can understand why they have a net negative migration, because when there's war, nobody's trying to run to Israel to be bombed from the sky.
Exactly. That it's not for a lack of understanding. It's to say that this settler colonial project is engaged in the process of land theft by extracting people from Europe and placing them in Israel to hold land. It's no different from an army.
But
It's no
look at the but look at the merit of the argument. Let's look at the merit of the Israeli argument from a prism of real politics,
okay.
which is, and again, if you want to look at the work of people like Hans Morgenthau, and they say that in terms of um, uh, what do you call it, realism, as the dominant theory of international relations, is about four key elements. Number one is state centrism, meaning the states are the most important players. They talk about power, they talk about rationality or self-interest, which is very important, and they talk about anarchy. So, from these four key points, you can argue that the Israelis are, in their opinion, fighting for what they describe as self interest in a very dangerous neighborhood, which is to preserve their own existence. And this is why they are also fighting to ensure that they dominate others, or at least reduce the power of others by making this sort of argument. And again, Iran have stated clearly over and over again that what they want is the complete elimination of the state of Israel and to drive them away, because that land, like you said at the beginning, people will argue on the other side, the Palestinians will say, hang on a second, we're here. These guys came from Europe and took our land. We are not going to accept it. So Iran is backing the claim made by Palestine and the other Arab neighbors that Israel is a colonial settler state and who have no place in the region. So if you look at the mindset of the state, I'm not talking about individual actors, the mindset of the state, and the reason why the Israelis, I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Put yourself in the mind of, as a rational actor, the prime minister of Israel, and there are bombs flying from everywhere with the intention of pushing you back or forcing you into acquiescence to accept whatever solution that the other side have. Would you just sit back and say, hang on, okay, I'm going to allow Iran to have nuclear weapon, I'm going to allow the Palestinians to chase me out? What will you do as the prime minister of Israel? Put yourself in their shoes.
Sure. So that's a specific talking point from the Israeli lobby, and I understand that you're playing devil's advocate on here. However, that is a direct talking point where they say to communicate our position to others, we must ask them, what would you do if rockets, thousands of rockets, were coming into your territory? Again, you're ascribing rationality to an irrational state and an irrational government. Rational governments abide by the rule of law. Do not confuse political rhetoric that other nations engage in when they say they want to wipe Israel off the map. Every year at the UN, the basis of the Palestinian state and agreeing to the 67 lines comes up for a vote. And every year, the same actors vote against it. Every year, the same actors vote for it. Iran happens to be one of those people that say, abide by the lines of 67. Israel refuses to. Instead, what you've seen is that they've stolen more land like the Golan Heights. I want you to think about something, and to the people listening. If you knew that there was a bad part of town that
Mhm.
you shouldn't go in and you don't want to be a part of because it's violent, what do? You don't go to that bad part of town. Instead, what Israel has decided to do is go not only to that bad part of town, but steal land, resources, and kill on the behalf and at the behest of a small settler colonial project that has religious zealots at its control. They have an actual doctrine called the Samson Doctrine that says if they lose the land or lose preeminent power, they will set off a nuclear weapon to maintain it so that nobody can have it. So they would rather rule over the ashes than live in peace. I don't
Again,
fall for their propaganda or lies, Sav.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't.
and I understand where you're coming from again, but again, I'm trying to be practical here. It's about looking at the merit of the argument. Do you think they have any case at all? When
No, they do not, Sav. They do not. Their argument, and I understand your position of devil's advocacy. However, it is not a rational argument. They import people from New York City, California, and the United States and Europe as a whole and import them to Israel. That is what they do. Flip it in reverse.
Mhm.
A bunch of Mexicans come to the United States. What do Americans say? We want them out. We
They're
don't want
aliens.
them here. They don't belong here. Brazilians come to the United States. We don't want them here. What are we seeing right now? ICE agents in the streets taking these people out, literally in handcuffs and killing them because they want them off of this land. So when you look back now and give analysis to the state of Israel, it's the same thing. The Palestinians have a legal claim to that land. And despite their legal claim, they are willing to say, we're tired of this. Let's just live by the 67 lines. They then voided the 67 lines and took the bad deal of Camp David. And that still wasn't enough. And even then, it's very clear during the negotiation process. It was very clearly said by the prime minister at the time. If I was the Palestinians, I would have never taken that deal. They inserted poison pills to ensure that there would never be a Palestinian state. So you're not dealing with a moral actor, you're not dealing with a rational actor, and you're not dealing with an actor that chooses or wants to abide by international law. So at that point in time, you're only left one result, which is conflict.
And lastly, and by the way, thank you so much for spending all this time with us. It has been
Sure.
informative. It has been really good. And I'm looking at the comments. They're very, very particularly some of the family members we have here, which is part of the Sab family. They're so excited to have you up here. And I'm looking at quietly infuriated, Adam, Pearl, all of them have all positive comments. So you guys have questions for Tailpipe, you can leave it in the comment section. This video is going to be uploaded up on YouTube and all other platforms. Don't forget to subscribe. And this has been really powerful and informative. And we've touched so many areas, even going to the Americas, talking about what is going on in the Middle East. So this has been well loaded and packed. So, lastly, with Iran, and again, what is the way out of this? Do you think the US will back out of an attack on Iran, or do you think Trump will be stupid enough to do it to see what happens?
So I have it on good measure that whenever you want to conduct strikes, there's
Mhm.
typically something done called surveys. So you develop what's called strike packages. You develop a strike package that says, okay, what are we going to attack? Are we going to attack infrastructure? Are we going to attack key personnel? I have been already told that strike packages have already been developed and they are working in progress and they can strike at any minute. I was talking to Mopeshi before a couple of weeks ago. I said it's guaranteed in my opinion some strike occurs by March. So literally it could be any day now. With these Epstein files as a key distraction, I can see that the strikes could potentially come. However, I would be surprised if it goes past March that they don't attack. Definitely by the spring, there will
So,
be an attack
so you're very confident that America will attack Iran?
of 95% to 98% certainty.
Yeah, because this is what a lot of people are saying. How do you move all this kinetic firepower to the region and just go
In
back?
order to have, again, you have an entire naval armada that's there. In
Mhm.
order to have that there per day, it's over $100 million.
Wow.
Okay? Per day. Okay, those naval boats can only sustain themselves for 3 days at a time with fuel, and then they need to be refitted. Okay, I want to be very clear. There's one plane in the U.S. arsenal that
Mhm.
is massively important. It's probably the most important plane that we have. It's called the RC-135. Its variation has changed over time, but it's a communications plane. It can soak up anything electronic that, if it turns on and it has an electronic pulse, it can get soaked up. Both of those planes are in the region now. Okay. When those planes fly, it's not by accident. It's not for a potential sortie or a mission that for training. They don't send those planes to train in that region at all whatsoever. So when you look at the totality, an entire naval armada, we have our planes that are currently in the region also. We have our stealth fighters in Diego Garcia. When you look at how the force posture has been, it's reasonable to discern that with great certainty of above 70% that there's going to be a strike. The fact that I have people that I know that are directly working at the Pentagon right now that very clearly have told me we're striking. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and it's
Right.
most likely going to happen before March.
And with Russia, Ukraine, before I go to Russia, Ukraine, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said, not him directly, but I think the spokesperson, sort of indicated that they're in talks with the Iranians and they're trying to persuade the Iranians to accept the deal from the US and to avert this conflict. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think the Iranians will back down?
No, it's not a matter. Again, we're not dealing with a rational partner. Look at how the goalpost has moved. It moved from you can no longer have a nuclear weapon, which they don't have, right? So how do you negotiate for something that you don't have and that you say that you don't want? To now it's moved to, well,
Ballistic missile program.
now you can't have a ballistic missile program or a long range strike program. Why? Because Israel saw the byproduct of what happened. Okay.
Mhm.
And again, they're moving their goalposts. You're basically saying that this nation cannot defend itself.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying. And no nation would stand for that.
Mhm.
And again, it's a nation of 90 million people. It's one of the most sophisticated nations in the world. It's literally one of the cradles of civilization. You are not just going to walk in there and one, topple that government or get them to capitulate. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely not. And with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it's winter in Europe. It's biting. It's very, very hard. And then the Russians are making advances across the 1,200 or 1,300 front line. Ukraine is struggling seriously with supplies, with the supplies, particularly with their air defense system. With troops, with remuneration of troops, a host of issues. Do you think the Russians are willing at this point to do a deal at this point in time where they have the upper hand with Ukraine?
Why do a deal when you have the upper hand? That's number one. But number two, Putin does not want control of Ukraine. He does not. It's not in his advantage. It's fundamentally not. You have a population of over 30 million people that, at best, let's say half of them like you, right? The other half don't like you. You become a steward of an ungovernable region.
Mhm.
Again, when you decide to take over a nation, you have to do certain things. You have to provide for the people. You have to provide and preside over laws. You are going to have a rogue nation that you're governing. No politician, no prime minister, no president wants to do that. Putin's claim is very, very simple. I do not want NATO on my border. Why? Because we have seen the negative consequences of what NATO has done. NATO is a nefarious actor. It is a reasonable request.
Yeah,
And
but
what
some people will say, hang on a second, Ukraine is an independent country. It can make its own policies. It can decide who it wants to invite in and who it doesn't want.
you are 100% correct that Ukraine can make those decisions. However, Ukraine is not free from its consequences. Again, Ukraine can still be free, can still decide to make its decisions, but the question becomes if its decisions are not in its best interest, why make those decisions? And again, Ukraine is not making those decisions freely. Right now in Ukraine, and for the last, what, 3 years, there are no elections. It's not a democratic state. It's under dictatorial control from a president that we installed with the overthrow of a government in 2014. This is very well articulated and laid out.
What is the moral justification of Russia's continuous onslaught on the Ukrainian people and to carry on this conflict in Ukraine without an end in sight?
So I don't think that it's Russia's impetus to continue this without an end in sight. Their position has been very clearly articulated. No NATO membership. And they will also give back territory. What they have said in the beginning, when you looked at the deal, they were willing to pull back completely. But the United States kept it going because they thought that they could bankrupt Russia. But what they ran into was a strongly and staunchly nationalistic country where its countrymen were willing to lay down their lives for the Russian government. But one of the key things that the United States didn't understand, this is a logistics game. Russia only has to transport arms 500 or so kilometers into the supply chain. The United States has to transport arms over 5,000 kilometers. So at the end of the day, by the time you resupply and by the time you go back to get your inventory, you've already exhausted whatever you dropped off while the Russians are maintaining a constant supply line. Look at the map. Look at how much territory Russia now controls. It was in Zelensky's best interest to make a deal 2 years ago. But we saw very clearly under Blinken, he was prevented and stopped. The UK government stopped him from doing that because their geopolitical strategy, they thought, was to bankrupt Russia. But they did not expect the Chinese to come in and support the Russian economy. And what has happened now? The Russian economy is stable and growing.
Yeah, and they've pushed Russia into the arms of China. China and Russia
100%.
have a lot of fundamental disagreements. They have a lot of differences. People don't know this. They think they are buddies because they fought so many wars, the Russo-Sino War. They fought so many wars, particularly in territories that are still disputed today. But what this, in fact, if you talk to the Russians, mostly in the West, because most Russians live in the western part of Russia, on the other side of the Caucasus Mountain, they see themselves as Europeans. They feel they are more culturally aligned to Europe than to the East.
Correct.
But what is happening now is that all of that is shifting to the East. The Russians are now placing so much emphasis in their infrastructure, building pipeline and railway and road to connect Russia with the East, with North Korea.
Let's be clear about something here, Sav. The Russian people, through xenophobia and racism, might identify culturally and from an identity standpoint with the Europeans. But I can guarantee you, economically, they identify better with China. Because why would, again, ask any Russian with some semblance of sense, ask any Russian politician, why would I want to take on and also identify myself with the Europeans that are failing? They're dying. Italy's GDP, look at it over the last 10 years. It's either been negative or flat. Look at the majority of European nations. They don't produce anything, literally nothing. They engage in extractive policies in Africa and other nations of color in order to, again, not my words, Sav, Jacques Chirac, former prime minister of France.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Africa, we would be reduced to less than a third world country. Not my words, his words.
Yeah,
So
Jacques Chirac.
why identify with a region of the world? They consider themselves a continent, whatever. They're not, but why identify with that part of the continent that's literally failing? You would never say, "Oh, I want to engage in what's going to give me cancer." Europe is a cancer, and Russia's best interest is to distance themselves, which is why they don't want a NATO country on their border, because that is cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. We draw the conversation to an end. This has been amazing. We're hoping to have you back on the channel again anytime soon as things continue to unfold on the international scene. We're also hearing that the Russian Ukraine conflict, that the Americans are trying to figure out whether it's possible for the two leaders to meet. Anytime soon. They talked about the possibility of going to the UAE, but that has been ruled out by the Russians. And now Putin and his people are inviting Zelensky to Moscow. Zelensky and his people are inviting Putin to Kiev. So we hope that all of this, as they continue to unfold, we'll have more conversations about it. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
It's not a problem, Saf. It was a pleasure. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. See you.
Take care, bro.
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much, guys. This was really amazing. You can go to the comments and leave your questions, and Tailpipe will respond to them when we have him back on the channel anytime soon. We're hoping soon. And if you have any question for me as well, if there's any other topic you want us to discuss from the geopolitical standpoint, in relations to what is happening around the world, from Africa to Europe to Asia, and also what is going on in China. A lot of people are not paying attention. There's a power tussle going on in China right now, which has sort of gone under the radar. The most powerful military guy in China now has been arrested and is facing investigation according to the CCP. General Zhang Yujia, who's the head of the Chinese Military Council, the CMC, has been arrested, and this is not the only one. The dominoes are about to fall, guys, because fundamentally there's a disagreement between him, and the leadership of the states, about how to go about Taiwan and a host of other issues. So thank you so much, guys, for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and most importantly, share this video. I'll see you in the next video.